Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time once again for Tales from 2 a.m. My name is Bryan Anthony Davis. Yes, it's not 2 a.m., but it's 2 a.m. somewhere. And if you're wondering, what does 2 a.m. mean, B-A-D? Well, I'm going to tell you exactly. First and foremost, the Steelers are out of the playoffs. This is an off-season show. You have not heard this show for a while. Last time you heard it was right before the start of the regular season. It's a show where we have lots of fun. We do the Steeler Retro Show a lot. Tony Defio and I do that every single week where we go back in time to talk about a game. But this is more about talking about the fun side of your Steelers fandom. Hey, we're going to talk about real life and what's going on with the Steelers. That's up to you in the live chat. This is definitely a live chat show. It's an opportunity for you to chime in as well. But what we like to talk about, days of Steelers past and our memories and what has shaped our fandom. Now, the reason it's called Tales from 2 a.m., I've got a lot of wild stories from the 80s and mostly the 90s and lots of fun stuff. But they're not all wild. It's not all about getting crazy out and about at the club with your friends, with whoever. It's not really about that. I mean, those stories do get mixed in from time to time, but really what Tales from 2 a.m. is about is I'm Mr. 2 a.m. That's what I've been called on the website for about maybe 2 years now. And the thing about Mr. 2 a.m. is I've got a lot of memories, and I take a lot of my life experiences and I throw them into where I was. And the reason my memory is so good is I could remember what I was doing based on what was going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers a lot of the time. So it's divisional weekend, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are out of the playoffs once again. I know I keep bringing that up. I'm so sorry. So we don't have a Steelers game this week. We should have been watching the Pittsburgh Steelers last night. This is recorded on Sunday morning. Last night, we should have been watching them take on the Buffalo Bills. The Bills only scored 17 points. Would have the Steelers done that against Buffalo? Would have they fared better than the Ravens? We don't know. Like to think that they would, but the way things were going, the way things got super out of control against Cleveland, they might have not. They might have been done. They might have hit that wall. We don't know. But we can't really speculate on that. If you want to, you can. That's what this show is all about. The only rules on this show is there aren't no rules. I'm quoting Grease. Gosh, am I quoting Grease this early in the morning? Yeah, and there's a lot of people saying, hey, it's super early. I get it. I know it's early for a lot of people out there. This is our Sunday show. We're going to get this out and about. It will be on the podcast platform come Monday as well. So if you're checking out on Monday, it's not early to you. Jared Devil's telling me, man, I should be sleeping. What's up, Bat? Yeah, I could be sleeping in too, but I've got a day of family and game watching, and you know what else? The season's over, so I'm doing other things too. That includes puzzles and binge watching and stuff around the house. That's the first question to you. What do you all do? And remember, this is definitely a live chat friendly show. So chime in. I want to hear from everybody that's watching this, listening to this on the live chat. So, gosh, and I'm getting some people saying, man, when they're saying that it's super early, I know we have some people on the West Coast. Jared Devil's saying it's 6 a.m. there. Mark Davison from Touchdown Under was going to come in on the show. And he's like, yeah, but it's going to be 1 a.m. here, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. So in the future, we're going to have some BTSC guests on the show talking about their memories, and that's really what this is all about. Lots of people jumping in, Ali and Knapp and CJ. CJ coming in on Facebook. A lot of people that are watching the show on Facebook, hey, you haven't had an opportunity to experience Tales from 2 a.m. Kathy's in the show. Good to see you, Kathy, as well. So if you know about Tales from 2 a.m., it's just an opportunity for you to talk about your fun stories too. So first thing first, does your Steelers fandom end when the Steelers are out of the playoffs? Does your NFL season end? For me, it does, but I keep watching. I'm not going to say that I watched 100% football yesterday. I should be, but I watched a lot of football yesterday. But we also were binge watching. My wife is right now, the flavor of the week is Riverdale. And we are binge watching Riverdale. My gosh, that's not the Archie comics that I grew up with. I will just tell you that. But quite crazy. We're about to find out who the Gargoyle King is. I mean, I think she's finding it out right now. I'm going to find out as soon as I get off of here. But we've been doing that. I've been doing. I did a Pittsburgh Steelers puzzle since the Steelers have been ousted from the playoffs. Of course, I'm working, and I'm also doing some stuff around the house. What do you guys do? What is happening with you in the off season? And do you go away from football completely? That's a good question. So that's what I'd love to ask you. David Moya says, I know we'll get into it. Just imagine when we win our next Super Bowl, how sweet it will be and all the stories to tell leading up to it. That's true. That is very true. And I've got some stories that lead up to Super Bowl victories. Really fun stuff. And we're going to talk about not just divisional games, divisional delights and divisional disasters. We're going to talk about that. That's going to be really what the show's about today. We're talking about the playoffs. Nap 1963 says, Nap, my good buddy, says, winter begins when the Steelers get ousted. Can't wait until spring. Yeah, for me, that's when my doldrums start. When the Steelers are gone, my winter doldrums start. It doesn't mean that I'm completely out of it. It just means that, here we go. I don't have the Steelers in a possible Super Bowl to look forward to, because I got to tell you this, like David Moya said, how sweet a Super Bowl run is. There is nothing like a Super Bowl run. And for the teams going through it right now, it is amazing. Those 3 to 4 weeks that those 3 to 4 weeks that you have when the Steelers are in the playoffs and leading up, especially to a Super Bowl, when you're watching them board a flight, you're going to a pep rally, all of that. That's exciting. This is what I love to see. Rodney Lyle says, no, I keep up with Steelers news. Good, because Rodney, you are at the right place then. BTSC. My gosh, we didn't stop, especially Thursday. Man, Jeff and Dave and Michael, they were going crazy on our Slack channel the other day because the news kept coming in. And that's something if you want to talk about too. There's a new offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh, and we could talk about stuff like that. But they had all this news to report. We are going to have so much. We don't stop. And that's the thing. Where a lot of people are going to have maybe 1-2 podcasts a week, we're still going to have them daily. In fact, we're having them twice daily. So you're going to have everything that you want Pittsburgh Steelers related. Jim Bork, I stopped drinking after the Steelers are done till the NFL draft. That's good. That is so the Steelers losing is good for your health, I guess. There you go. So here we go. Let's talk about the playoffs and let's talk about what we do. Henry catches up on other sports. I start getting into hockey. It's tough because everything's a little different, but I'll get into hockey again. I lost touch with baseball last year. I'm hoping to get back into baseball. I'm not a big NBA guy. I would be an NBA guy if the Pittsburgh City had an NBA team, but they don't. So, I still try. I'll follow the Lakers here and there, not because of LeBron, because of way back when I was a kid. It was always Kareem and Byron Scott and Magic Johnson and Kurt Rambis. It was those guys for me way back in the day. I'll follow them every once in a while too, but I can't remember the last time I sat down to watch an NBA game. Dave Shepley just says, good morning. Dean McCrae says it's muzzle loader season. There you go. Muzzle loader season. That's fun, man. That's really cool. We find a lot of things to do. This is really funny. Vodka drinker watching Urban Cowboy. Wes was tougher than Bud. You know what? I don't think I've seen Urban Cowboy since 1980 when that movie came out. And that was 40 years ago. I think I saw it on VHS though. So maybe it's been 40 years since I've seen it if you want to know what that's about, good music in that one, actually. But it's John Travolta. It's a mechanical bull. It's lots of excitement. Kathy Forehead is saying, hey, anything but Browns versus Pack. How excited is everybody to see the Ratbirds gone? I know that. I got to tell you, really glad about that. That game could have gone a completely different way. She doesn't want to see the Packers in there. Here's one thing that I look at when the Steelers aren't in it. I look at a new matchup. That's what I want more than anything. Last year, we got a new matchup. That was great. The year before, we didn't get a new matchup. But the year before that, we got a new matchup with the Eagles and the Patriots. So this year, there's only one possible repeat matchup, and it's probably the most likely. It's Chiefs against Packers, but that happened in Super Bowl I. So that's the last time that. So it's, even though it's a repeat matchup, it's not, it's kind of new because it hasn't happened in, like we said, it hasn't happened in almost 54, 55 years. So there you go. But any other, because if the Browns are in it, which, gosh, how crappy would it be if we had to watch the Cleveland Browns in the playoffs? That would be a disaster to me because, I just don't like Baker Mayfield. I abhor Myles Garrett. I can't stand Kareem Hunt. I don't even like Jarvis Landry. My gosh, is Jarvis Landry the angriest guy that you've seen play football? Now, there's one thing I'm going to say about each and every one of these guys. They play tough, though. So if you're a fan of football, you probably think, hey, these guys are pretty good. If you're a fan of the Steelers, though, you're going to recognize that they're very good players, but you're going to recognize that you can't stand them because of the rivalry. And that's why I can't stand them. And that's the only reason why, because of the rivalry. Rodney Lyles says Ravens out. Yeah, that's a sweet thing. How many times have you seen Tucker miss? Doink, one ball, let alone two. That's absolutely crazy. I'm telling you what, if Lamar does not throw that pick six, the Ravens probably win that game. I know ifs and buts, candy and nuts. I know that whole thing, but the Ravens are winning that ball game if they get in the end zone there. I'm telling you, I think that was the complete game changer. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I got a text early this morning from Knapp, and actually it was from last night, and I just saw it this morning. And so Knapp said to me, he's like, hey, isn't it great to see Wang Harb's out of the playoffs? Yes. Anytime I can see John Harbaugh lose a game, I'm happy. It's a rivalry thing. I mean, people that don't experience the Steelers and the AFC North probably don't understand why we call them the Ratbirds. Well, Tennessee does. I know Tennessee is a huge rivalry with the Ravens, and I love it. And when we talk to those guys from Tennessee Titans Weekly, those guys are absolutely fantastic. Hawk and Lockdown. And, we got to get those guys on here again, maybe on this show too. But when those guys talk about who they hate the Ravens too. And they're like, just beat the Ravens for us. That's all we ask. So that's awesome. Knapp says that that pick six was reminiscent of Harrison's in the Super Bowl. Yeah, it kind of was. And we'll be talking about stuff like that. Bad Itch. I love it. I'm binge watching Golden Girls and eating Xanax. My gosh, we were on a binge watching tear with the Golden Girls. It's not so much now that we have HBO Max. We're watching a lot of Big Bang Theory every night. We just let it run all night long and fall asleep to it. That's my wife's thing, and I love it. But she had me watching the Golden Girls. Most of the time, excuse me, most of the time she picks what we're going to binge watch. So I gotta love it. And if you're listening, this is showing up on the super chat. If you're listening and you want to throw in a comment, hey, feel free to throw it in on our social media. BAD BTSC. Oh, actually, let me do that again. At BTSC BAD. There you go. You can check it out. Man, I guess it is early because I don't know my Twitter handle. Like I said, this is a heavy live chat show too. David Moya says Saints versus Bills. Let's go. You know what? I can handle Saints versus Bills. I would love that. That would be a really cool matchup. And, you got to admit the Chiefs would be a pretty good matchup as well. That would be a lot of fun. But a lot of people are tired of the Chiefs already, and they've only won one. So Saints versus Bills, I would get into that. I'm not a big Bills fan, but I was rooting for him heavily yesterday. I do like Stephon Diggs. I'm a fan of Stephon Diggs. I love what he does. I respect what Josh Allen is doing. He kind of annoys me, but I really respect his game. But the thing about the Bills that I can't stand, and the reason I don't like the Bills, has nothing to do with anybody that's wearing that jersey. Well, yeah, it does have something to do with people that are wearing the jersey. Fans. That Bills Mafia, they're insane. Look, I'm all about having fun. You know me. I guess as I'm getting close to 50, some people are thinking that I'm becoming that guy shaking my fist at clouds, because I've been doing it a lot with Juju and the tweets and the TikTok and the comments. And that's something we could talk about too. There's just some things that you do. I don't mind if you're ornery. My gosh, I'm using the word ornery. Man, I do feel old. But I don't care if you do stuff like that, but do it smart. And when you're inciting, that could hurt your team. We saw it with the TikTok videos. Juju, my gosh, when you're dancing on a logo, I know this is over. I know you stopped doing it, but you did other things to incite teams. That's the things I want you to think about. We don't know if Juju's going to be a Steeler again. But when you were dancing on Cincinnati's logo, they came out to kill you. That's what they wanted to do. They hit you so hard, you fumbled, they scored. Guess what? That hurts your team when you're doing stuff like that. I know you meant no disrespect, but that comes off a different way. Chase Claypool. Chase, man, I get it. I'm feeling the same way. I'm allowed to get away with saying that. But when you say it, teams remember that about the Browns are going to get clapped. So it's all good. Look, a loss isn't all good, because that should stick in your craw and get you ready for next year. And that's really, really what it's about. David Moya says this: I don't want Bucks to win because of AB, and I don't want the Chiefs to win because of a repeat and Bell. And if Tampa goes to the Super Bowl, it will be a home game for them. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I don't think they are. That would be a great story, but I just don't think they're going to the Super Bowl. And it's the Brady thing too, because Brady's been there, so many times. So there you go. James Kelly says, that's the second time today someone referred to the old man shaking fist to clouds. Rob Lowe said it on Willie Geist about an hour ago. What is Willie Geist? Is that, man, that must be showing that I'm out of touch. I got to check that out. Big Rob Lowe fan. Where we get old man shaking fist at clouds, it was actually from The Simpsons. And Abraham Simpson, I think like the headline on the Springfield paper was "Old Man Shakes Fist at Clouds." And I get accused of that a lot lately. And I'm not, because one of the reasons I'm Mr. 2 a.m. is because I'm not afraid to go out and be ornery. Nap says, showing your age bad. I do the same thing all the time. So James Kelbaugh says NBC early news. Great. I'm glad to know that. Dan Goth wants KC and Tampa. Kathy says no, AB jinxed them. There you go. And yeah, James is agreeing that it's a Simpson episode. Yep. Jeff Hartman brought that back into our lexicon too, because on the preview, there's always one of us that goes off on why this is wrong, which includes Jeff going off, and I kind of agreed with him on the Nickelodeon game. And Dave actually defended the Nickelodeon game. But when you're putting slime into an NFL post-game press conference with an NFL coach, come on, stop. Michon Raymond Curran says Bills versus Packers. That's a really fun matchup there too. And Kelly Diana Sturms, my offseason is the Steelers draft and BTSC. Thank you, Kelly. And I got to tell you, the cool thing about that is we're going to be having a lot of draft podcasts on draft weekend. Man, you're going to see so much of this ugly face as we talk about it like absolute crazy. That's the draft. So This is Tales from 2 a.m. I haven't really got into the tales. I'm going to get into that next. And we are going to talk about divisional delights and disasters. So I want you to start thinking about divisional games. You can talk about other playoff games, ones that hurt the most, ones that you found the most pleasure with. I've got a great 2 a.m. story that I'm sure we've talked about before, but I'm going to bring it back. It's going to go back in time, and it's something that happened almost, and I'm talking almost 15 years to the day. We're going to be talking about that coming up next, and I can't wait. But if you're on the audio platform, just go ahead, download number 2. It's just clicking. That's all it is. It's a quick click, and that's what you got to do. Please come back. We're going to have lots of fun. Also, if you are on Facebook or if you're on YouTube, you just stick around. I'm going to do a quick stretch. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back in just a couple. When I say a couple, I'm talking seconds, friends. Stick around. Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to Tales from 2 a.m. I am Mr. 2 a.m. I am Bryan Anthony Davis. And you know what? I just found this out recently. My mom started watching me every time I pop up. Now, she never watched me before. She did not watch me on YouTube. But now that we are on Facebook, and that's been about 6 weeks, when it pops up on her screen, she goes and watches. So, Mom, thanks so much. I've got a great fan in Mom. I love it. That is really something special to me that my mom, Patricia, is watching this game. And, well, it's not a game. I'm sorry, watching the show. So, Mom, if you're out there, love you. Thank you so much. And you know what? The reason I bring that up is my family is how I got into being a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And we talked about that a lot. And when I have these memories, a lot of the great memories of these games are watching them with my family. I remember my dad talking about a playoff game back in 1972. You might have heard of it. It's called the Immaculate Reception. And they had to go, I don't know whether it was that game or the next week against the Dolphins, but they had to go to a hotel room because this was 1972. And it had to be on closed circuit because they couldn't get that particular game. So my dad went to this game with friends and family and watched it, and he said it was just absolutely spectacular watching it. So a lot of people have memories of where they were, what they were doing for these games. So I'm going to talk about some of my favorite divisional games, and some of them I was at. I remember in the 2001 season, it would have been 2002, going to the Steelers and the Ravens. They were 13-3 that year. So what we were hoping was that was a Super Bowl. And guess what? We made it through on the list. If the Steelers went through to the Super Bowl, and my buddy Doug, who I got to tell you, my buddy Doug, today is his 50th birthday. So Doug out there, you're a big part of my Super Bowl fandom, my Steeler fandom. So I love you, buddy, and happy birthday. So he had season tickets, and he still does. And we got through on the list. And we ended up it was going to be in Louisiana. This was the game after 2001, September 11th. So the world was different back then. The U.S. was very united, but there were so many things going on. There was worry about the game. It was in the Louisiana Superdome, though. Security was going to be tight. We had plane tickets. We had a hotel room. It was probably maybe an hour or two away, but we had an opportunity that we were going to try to go, and we ended up not going because the Steelers lost in the AFC Championship game. I'll probably talk about that next week when we talk more about AFC Championships. But what happened is we go to that game, and the Steelers are playing the Ratbirds, and the Ratbirds, of course, are always dangerous. You know, they had Elvis Gerback at the time, and they were still a pretty good team. And so we're waiting for Jerome Bettis to come out of the tunnel, and he doesn't. And he's not starting in this game, and we're like, where's Jerome? What happened to Jerome? Well, they they shot him up because he had a lot of pain back then. I mean, he was getting older in his NFL career. They hit a nerve and he couldn't move. He was basically paralyzed for a couple hours. Not, I mean, just where he was so numbed out that by hitting that nerve, he could not go. The Steelers still didn't win that game. That was a really fun game to watch. Now, we went with I went with a bunch of buddies. I was living in Elkins, West Virginia at the time, and one of our friends was a Ravens fan, a genuine Ravens fan. He was from somewhere near Baltimore, and he talked about the Ravens all the time. And it's funny, I was friends with him, and he ended up marrying one of my old girlfriends. We never talked about that, but we were always very friendly. I actually kind of towards the end became really good friends with him. I thought he was a really good dude. But my buddy Tom, the more that he tailgated, let's put it that way, he went after my buddy. It was a horrible ride home for him, and I felt so bad because he kept on talking about the Ratbirds, and that's the first time I ever heard Ratbird, actually. Kept on talking, and this guy, I'm sure he couldn't wait to get out of the car. So it was just a funny thing. I'll always remember that about that game. But it was a good feeling because it was my first divisional playoff game that I got to go see. You know what? Come to think of it, it might have been my only. Now, I think there were a couple more in there, but for that one, that was one of the that was a great experience. And I went the next week, and the next week was not a great experience, but we'll talk about that another time. So another divisional game that I'll never forget, it's watching with my dad. If you listen to Merry Christmas Memories, Merry Steeler Memories, Tony Defio talks about this. And this was our first retro show, one of our favorite games to talk about. Tony and I are the same age. It was the Steelers and the Broncos in 1984. And the Broncos were 13-3 at the time, and they had nobody elected to the Pro Bowl. So they had T-shirts made up. They were called Rodney's Rejects. And if you don't know why they were Rodney's Rejects, it was simple. Rodney Dangerfield, the great movie star and comedian, he had the get no respect. That was his deal. I get no respect. If you've never heard him, go ahead on YouTube, download some of his stuff. The guy was really funny. He was very self-deprecating, very funny. Of course, I know you know movies like Caddyshack and Back to School. Really funny stuff. Even movies like Ladybugs, which was pretty bad, but it was funny. And a lot of people don't know this. Rodney Dangerfield was the drunk, abusive father in Natural Born Killers. That was one of his later movies. But anyways, as far as Rodney's Rejects go, that was an interesting team. John Elway was in the second year. This was a really good team. And the Steelers just popped in. We joke all the time about the Washington football team making it in at the record that they did, 7-9. We almost had a 6-10 team if things didn't happen in that Washington-Philadelphia game and the New York Giants would have won. If the Philadelphia would have beaten Washington, New York would have won based on the tiebreaker. They would have gone in at 6-10. So the reason I bring that up, the Steelers were a 9-7 team, and back then that was just getting into the playoffs, and you really don't have much hope. But since they were a division winner, that was a rough division at the time, the AFC Central. They get in, and next thing you know, you're thinking this team's just going to be one and done. That's it. And it's Christmas time. This game was December 30th, and it's still the holiday season for us. I remember the tree's still up. I remember watching it with my dad. My sister, my mom was down there too. And we're watching this game. And the whole time, my dad keeps on, and my dad wasn't this guy, but he keeps on, because he's the one who coined the term, you know, you don't celebrate until there's zeros on the clock. But he looks at me and says, Bryan, I think they're going, I think they're going to do something here. And that really wasn't him. And they did. The whole time you're waiting for it to fall apart. Gary Anderson missed a couple field goals in that game. The field was a mess. But it was such a fun game visually. It was a beautiful game visually to watch. That team was amazing. Walter Abercrombie, even Mark Malone. I mean, dare I say it, Mark Malone had a great game. A game good enough to win, and they did. And I'll never forget that. That being that was a defining divisional game for me. They did lose the next week, but it showed that anything could happen. And I remember my dad saying that to me, and like, you know what? Yeah, they don't deserve to be in this game, but when you play with heart and when you have that special kind of magic, you can make anything happen if you put your mind to it. And that's kind of where my love for the Steelers really started. I had love for them, but that was the game that really did it for me. And I got to tell you, I've confession to make. I have a John Elway jersey. That game, even though I rooted for the Steelers, I had a little bit of a love affair with the Broncos. One, because of their colors at the time, and the fact the Steelers after that weren't doing too well in 85 and 86. And so I rooted for them second, but never when they played the Pittsburgh Steelers. Probably did the same thing with the San Francisco 49ers, but gosh, my God, I'm talking, I was 11 or 12 back when this game was on. But that was the last of it. Now I just now it's black and gold or bust. But once again, I'm making this admission, but I never went against the Steelers. You don't go against the family. There you go. I know my impressions are terrible. So, but that's another one of my favorite games. Of course, one of my all-time favorite games, and I know it's yours too, happened 15 years ago. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it happened on January 15th of 2006. I'm not good at multitasking. I'm going to try to do that here, but it's the Pittsburgh Steelers at Indianapolis Colts in the playoffs. And if I was going to try to type it in, but the problem with that is that I would stop and I would have to think about it because I'm not very, like I said, I'm not very good at that. But I'm still, you know what? I'm going to try to do it. I'm going to try to type it in and say 2006 and get the exact date of that game. And I am correct. It was January 15th, 2006. The Steelers travel to Indianapolis. And Indianapolis, gosh, they were 13-0, 14-0 at one point. They didn't care about going 16-0. There's a lot of stuff going on. There are Tony Dungy. That's when he lost his son. So I don't think he coached the last couple games of that season. He might have. It was a very tough time, and since Tony Dungy was a part of the Steelers family at one point, there was not a lot of animosity towards Tony Dungy because a lot of people always loved Tony Dungy, even when he coached other teams. You wanted to beat him on game day, but there was a lot of respect for Tony. Now, so going into that game, the Steelers, gosh, man, no one thought they had a chance, even though they had a very good season. But that was the year, and it really was the year that the Steelers had that 8-game stretch where they were perfect. With 4 games to go, Bill Cowher comes out and says, this is our playoffs. Every game, we can't lose a single game. And they couldn't. They did not have a chance if they would have lost a single game. And I tell you about that last game of that season, January 1st. That's when I first realized that my wife was the one for me when I took her to the game, one of our first dates, and she cried when the fans chanted "one more year for Jerome Bettis," and I knew she was the one for me. But I digress. So they get into this game just about 6 weeks earlier on November 28th. The Steelers lost on Monday Night Football. I think it was 28-3. My gosh, the Colts trounced them. But something happened before this game. And it happened more afterwards too. I mean, it became more famous afterwards. But I just talked about bulletin board material with Juju earlier. But we got some bulletin board material with Joey Porter. But if anybody was able to back up his mouth, it was Joey Porter a good bit of the time. And Joey Porter said, guaranteed a win before this game. And I know I'm going, oh no. I know Bill Cowher was going, oh no, because after the game, he said, will you keep quiet this week, Peasy? And that's when you got the famous, no, I got this. They shot me in Denver. So, because they were going to play Denver after that game. But so that was just a game. The Steelers came out firing. It's 7-0. Then it's 14-0. And you're like, what is going on? And so I lived in an apartment in Frostburg, Maryland. And it was just me at the time. I had, like I said, I had just started dating the woman who would become my wife. And we're still happily married today. We would get married a year later, actually. But so that I had a neighbor, and she was this beautiful 75-year-old woman named Joanne. Now, Joanne, she has since passed away. She did attend my wedding years later. I was such good friends with this woman. And the reason I was such good friends with this woman, because she was a huge football fan. Her husband was a legendary coach in Maryland, and he had passed away earlier that year, like right after I moved into the apartment. And I was away on business, and I needed somebody to set up my apartment. So my parents went down, and my girlfriend at the time, this was a year before, so it was a different girlfriend. So they went down and they set up my apartment. And my mom, they loved buying me Steelers stuff at craft shows. And they had this wreath that they put on my door. It was a Steelers wreath. And this woman saw it and immediately knew that I would be her friend. So I hardly had a chance to talk to her. But when I read that her husband passed away, I went to the funeral home and to pay my respects. And after that, we became really good friends. And it got to the point, I had West Virginia University season tickets at that time. And so I knew she was a football fan. And I said, you know what? I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to a game. So I took her to a couple of games. So here I am. And I'm about 32 years old at the time, maybe. And here I am, and my date for these games, West Virginia University, is this 75-year-old woman. And I had a bunch of friends at tailgates, and all my friends at the tailgates, they'd be like, I see your date there. You have a sugar mama there. They're bad. And I'm like, she's my buddy. And I watched a bunch of games with her, did all of that. But I was so superstitious. And the reason I was superstitious was because, a lot of the times I just follow the same routine. And at that time, for the first playoff game, I went to about an hour away, and I went to a party that my future wife had at her house. I spent the night there, and then I came back in the morning, watched the game wearing an Antoine Randall L white Steelers jersey, because I always wear the jersey that they're wearing. So if they're wearing white, I'm wearing white. So I'm wearing this Antoine Randall L jersey. I'm sitting in the same spot. I'm doing pretty much the same thing. I'm not cooking the same thing, but I'm doing the same thing. So what happens? They start coming back. The Colts start coming back. But in the middle of that game, I made a pot of chili, and I took the chili over to Joanne, And she's watching and she goes, "You gonna sit down and watch the game with me?" I'm like, "I can't. I got to go back to the routine. I'm sorry." She goes, "I understand." So what happens is, excuse me if I get a little choked up because this story always gets me choked up. But what happens is the Steelers, they get to the point where they have the Colts pinned down deep. The Colts are coming back, but they almost get a safety. They were just jumping all over Peyton Manning. They didn't get, a lot of people thought they had a safety. They didn't. And then turnover on downs. Pittsburgh has the ball. Less than 2 minutes left. Give it to Jerome Bettis. You know what happens? He fumbles. Right before he fumbled, though, there's a knock on my door. And I always just say, "Yeah, come in." And there's Joanne. And she comes in and says, "Congratulations." And the thing about congratulations is I have no problem with that, and I appreciate it. But remember I told you about my dad's rule. You don't celebrate until there's zeros on the clock. I kind of broke the rule there. And we've seen so many times when there's zeros on the clock and people would call us. I mean, there's not zeros on the clock. People would call us, and then the Steelers would turn around and win. So what happens? And Vodka Drinker says 43 got robbed of a pick. He definitely did. I've got a story about that too. But what happens is she comes and she sits down on my recliner. She wants to tell me congratulations. I'm not going to say a word to her about it. No problem. The minute that her butt hit my recliner, Jerome Bettis fumbles. And I'm going, "Oh no, no, oh no, oh no, oh no." And then there he goes. Nick Harper. Now, Nick Harper, his wife stabbed him the night before in a domestic dispute in the leg. Don't know if he was 100%, but she might deserve a Super Bowl ring for doing that. Hey, I am not advocating stabbing or domestic violence. I'm not doing that, but that's what happened. All right. So he's running down the field. Ben makes the craziest tackle I've ever seen. I don't know how that happened. I'm not sure at all how that happened. And I got to tell you, I looked at Joanne and she said, "Oh my." She just looked at me and said, "Oh my." And I said, "Joanne, I love you more than anything in the world. You know that. But you've got to get out of my apartment right now." And she looks at me and says, "I understand." And she got up and she left. And then I felt terrible about that. The Steelers win. I'm elated. And I'm thinking, you know what? I got to go apologize. And I go over there and she said, "Hey, come in." I'm like, "I've got to apologize. I think that was so rude." She goes, "No, I know the rules. And I know you don't celebrate. And I broke those rules. And I almost cost you the game." I'm like, "You didn't cost us the game. You would have not cost us the game." And she goes, "Nope, I won't do that again." And then we sat down, talked about the game. We had more chili, and it was a lot of fun. But I'll never forget that story where I kicked a 75-year-old woman out of my apartment just because of that, just because of my superstition. And that's kind of what the Steelers do to you. I kind of wish I would have never done it. But it is a story, and I will keep that story forever. And just blessings to Joanne. It's just she became my Steeler buddy, and she was actually a Raiders fan, but she became a Steeler fan for me, and she cheered with them like crazy. She had family, she had grandchildren that were Steelers fans, but she was always my Steeler buddy. We watched a lot of games together. We just didn't watch those playoffs together. Somebody mentioned that 43 got robbed of a pick in that game. Yeah, he did. So a couple years later, after this, they came out with the DVD sets. And I remember sending a DVD set to my best friend who lives in Los Angeles. And he was, I sent him the set. They had all 4 games. And he was dating a woman at the time. And she's like, I know you love football. I would love to know more about what I'd love to experience more of what you love. So I'm going to watch a Steeler game with you. And he's like, well, if you're going to watch a game, we're going to watch Steelers and Colts from January of 2006. So they sit down and watch it. And they get to the point where Troy Polamalu is robbed of that interception. That was, I mean, I've seen worse calls, but that was one of the worst I've ever seen. Because he got up, started to run with the ball. It was dead. And the next thing you know, it pops out and they're saying no interception. And the Colts have new life. And this was in the second half of the game. And so my buddy says, now you see that referee, he's telling her about the game. That referee, that was one of the worst calls. I don't know. I hate this guy. She said, you know what? That's funny. Because it was Pete Morelli. She goes, that was my high school principal. Because, you know, a lot of these guys back then really, still now, they have full-time jobs, and being an NFL referee is a part-time job. Back then, especially. And he said, oh my gosh, really? She goes, yeah, he's a super nice guy. He's like, well, he's a bad referee that day. I'll never forget that. So Ryan O'Toole says this: if Bad did the 2 a.m. thing correctly, the show wouldn't be happening yet. LOL. That's why 2 a.m. is a memory show, Ryan O'Toole, who just woke up. And I got to tell you, I don't know if I think 2 a.m. is, it's all about memories and fun stuff. So there you go. And looks like we had a Browns troll in there. Guys, good job, live chat. Took care of him. Hey, look, if you're a Browns fan, just be cool in here. Congratulations. There are no excuses for the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. The Cleveland Browns won that game. The excuses are everything that they did wrong to lose. Browns won that game. I'm not going to follow Chase Claypool and say you're going to get clapped this week. Good luck. Enjoy it, because these don't happen all the time, and that's what we're talking about here. You're welcome in my show anytime. Just don't be a Harbs. That's all I'm saying. With that being said, there are some divisional game disasters. Really, some of them that I think about, the biggest disaster that I think of when you're talking about the divisional game, there's been some, but gosh, Raiders, I believe it was like 38-3 on January 1st, 1984, when the Raiders completely punked the Steelers. Cliff Stout. My gosh, if Bradshaw was healthy, that would have been a different year. That would have been a really interesting year in 1983. That was a good team. If anybody else has any great divisional game memories, let us know. If you have some disastrous ones, I get that too. So Steelers Pittsburgh says, eating breakfast, listening to old Steelers stories. That is what this show's about. I get it. It's early. I understand. We're going to be doing this every week. And my hope is to have some friends from BTSC joining me on the show. They were making fun of me because I decided last night to put the invitation out. I was so busy, and I'm like, oh man, I put the invitation out at like 9 p.m. They're like, yeah, you got to give us more than 12 hours for this. So you're going to have some people there. That is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about fun stuff like your superstitions. We've talked about that before in the show. We're going to talk about jerseys. We're going to be talking about your terrible towel collection. We're going to talk about all that stuff. And that's what we're going to do here on Tales from 2 a.m. It's a lot of fun. Hey, and we could definitely talk about anything you want to talk about. You want to talk about the games that you saw, the games coming up. Hey, today you've got the Browns. They're playing Kansas City. Are you just tired of Kansas City already? Or do you want to see the Browns upset them? This is a really funny thing for me because I'm one of those that when I never root for the AFC North, especially in the playoffs. I just don't, because they're my chief rivals. Some people say, hey, I'm an AFC North guy. If the Steelers aren't in it, I'm going to root for the other team. Me, I'm all Chiefs today. Pat Mahomes, sweet homes. That's what I'm saying. So sing it to Motley Crue. He's on his way. The Browns won't stay. Mahomes, sweet Mahomes. There you go. That's my Vince Neil. I'm probably in a lot better shape than Vince Neil. Love me some Motley Crue. Hey, look, this is what this show is all about. It's a lot of fun. Kyle Schofield, Big Bro Sco's son and nephew of co-editor Dave Schofield. Realistic one. Don't count the Bills out. The Chiefs don't have the greatest defense, and he didn't put it on there. I'm going to say it. Hashtag pay Kyle. Don't forget that. Hashtag pay Kyle. So we talked about a lot of fun stuff. Somebody mentioned here about earlier about the offensive coordinator position. Yeah, Matt Canada's the new OC in Pittsburgh. They also asked who's going to be the offensive line coach. I don't think that's going to be. I don't think that's going to be a guy that you really know. But they're going to do due diligence. They're going to bring the right guy in, and I think that's going to be huge for him. I don't know if you're going to find another Munchak. That'd be great. I'd love to see Munchak come back. He's not going to, but So there's so much. Somebody said Faneca. Wow, how awesome would that be? Sometimes the great players don't make the greatest coaches, but we've seen it before. Especially Munchak was he was a Hall of Fame player, and I really think that he's a Hall of Fame coordinator. I got to tell you that I actually think that we should have in the Hall of Fame and in the Pro Bowl, I think we should have a coordinator of the year. I think in the Hall of Fame, we should recognize the best coordinators. Now, Dick LeBeau's in the Hall of Fame, but he's not in the Hall of Fame for being a defensive coordinator. He's for what he did as a player. Ryan O'Toole says, look at Joey Porter, apparently not a good coach. Yeah, no, he really wasn't that good of a coach. And we've seen a few of them that way. What I'd like to see is those guys being recognized, because when you look at guys like Munchak, Norv Turner, Wade Phillips, those guys were not great head coaches, but they were amazing offensive/defensive coordinators, whichever one, because Wade Phillips was a defensive coordinator. They were absolutely great at what they did. So as far as that goes, my friends, this has been Tales from 2 a.m. My name is Bryan Anthony Davis. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's early. Some of you, it's 6 a.m. Some of you, it's even earlier because you could be in Hawaii. You could be overseas. Like I said, Matt Davison right now, it's 1 a.m. That's why he's not on the show. Kyle says Randy Fietner was the best D coordinator for whoever the Steelers played. Good job, Kyle. I tell you what, Kyle, tell your dad, be on the show next week. He could be my guest next week. And Kyle, you want to come on in? You could come on in too, buddy. With that being said, my name is Bryan Anthony Davis. Cannot do this show. We cannot do any of these shows without all of you, whether you're in the live chat, whether you're driving in your car and it is Wednesday morning and you're checking out this show. I love you. Thank you so much. You're so important to us. Like I said, we are a BTSC family, and families talk about memories, and that's what we do here on Tales from 2 a.m. So for myself, Bryan Anthony Davis, and all of you in the live chat, it's 2 a.m. somewhere. We'll see you.